Hey, Tony from BikeBerry. It's good to see you. So one of the things I'm running into lately that I haven't run into in the past is winterization of our motorized bikes. I have more projects in here than I ever have, and I'm getting pushed out of the shop, which is making me think of I got to get a shed that then I can put the bikes in, but it's not going to be heated like my shop and office is here. I have air conditioning and heating in here, and I work on these things all year round, so I never really give them a chance to need winterization. But I was asking people in the group, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to start doing that. So what do you do? People who live in Canada, like Keegan Hache. We got people who live on the East Coast where it gets a lot of snow in the United States. We have people in California, Arizona that don't really do anything because it's a stable temperature all year. Then there's those in between in Illinois and central U.S. where we get a lot of our winter is 30 degrees or so, with dips down to the colder part, right? We'll have a week of 0 at times. So some bikes have a battery on it, like the Bullet Train. So what do we do for that? What kind of fuel are you using in your area? Does it have ethanol in it? Does it not have ethanol in it? What are you able to use? So let's dive into people's preferences and what I've learned so that I can start winterizing my bikes properly, just like you should. Let's roll. So first, let's start off with who needs to even winterize their bike. I think there's 2 categories. We have our commuter, which is somebody that relies on the bike a lot. Then we have our hobbyist. Now, I have other categories that I think of in these terms of motorized bike builders, and that would be like tinkerer, and then also performance race enthusiast kind of person. But those people are busy building and working and tweaking so much, I don't think that winterization really applies to them too much. So the hobbyist, though, and then the commuter, definitely. So let's define what a commuter is. A commuter is somebody who rides this thing on the regular. They will go to work and back with it. They go to the grocery store. They go around town in it. It's their mode of transportation for their life. So that's somebody they rely on it, okay? And I would say that there's a good fair amount of people that I see in the Facebook group and online here that is their ride of choice. So that's really cool, and that takes a special kind of winterization than I think anybody else. Now, let's define what a hobbyist is. I would put myself in more of a category of hobbyist. I don't ride long distance very often. The most we go is 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. We'll ride around here, but a lot of my time is spent building and testing and then riding up and down my road. I'll ride into town a little bit for a longer test. We'll go to the park sometimes. Our family rides sometimes. But I have multiple bikes, and so some of them don't get ridden for quite a while. So what kind of storage maintenance should we do then in winterization, okay? Where, as in the commuter, that person is going to ride all the time, and whether they have multiple bikes or not, they're probably going to rotate them enough that they don't really have to worry about the same kind of winterization. So let's dive into the winterization that each type needs to maybe look at for their situation. So to learn more about the commuter, I asked several of them. I said, what do you do during the winter time? How does it work for you? And the feedback that I got was pretty interesting. There's some of them that use ethanol-free fuel. So they have a gas station local to them that has ethanol-free fuel. I wish ours did, but it doesn't. So if that's something that you have opportunity to purchase, then I would go that route, because then any of the potential gumminess that would go into your engine, you wouldn't have to deal with the ethanol. So that's one thing that you could do. The next thing is a little fuel stabilizer. I know a lot of people use this throughout the winter just to make sure that any sitting time that the bike has, that it won't get all gummed up and everything, and then that way the fuel will just keep flowing through everything, and you really don't have to drain the carburetor or anything like that. Another thing is lubrication. If you're riding in conditions where ice and water gets in, that turns into ice because you're riding in the wintertime and it's freezing and all that, whole bike lubrication is something I would think about. There's lubricants that coat the chain, so that could really help you to shed any ice and snow off of it. There's other things like making sure that in your annual maintenance that you're really using a high quality, high temperature grease in your crankshaft and your head tube and all of your main parts that you can grease, you know, in your hubs and your rims and everything, your wheel sets. So overall, lubrication and then some kind of maybe spray lubrication of choice, just to make sure, almost like that lock de-icer that you spray into a lock in your, you know, your car or whatever, using something like, you know, that idea, not a lock de-icer, maybe that'll help you. But, you know, using a spray lubricant of your choice to go into that. That's something that I'm going to experiment with. I hear pros and cons of all of that stuff. So, you know, like a lithium grease or something like that. So I'm going to check those things out for myself and I'll report back to you to let you know how it's worked for me. But an overall lubrication of the entire bike from top to bottom, front to back. That'd be the next thing. So another thing I was thinking about was tires. Like you look at these hookworms and they aren't good for gravel roads. They're not good for snow and ice. They're not good for any of that. What they're good for is a nice dry road. And yeah, I've ridden them in the rain and they're okay there too. But a paved road is really their main place that they love to roll on. Now, when you come to snow and ice and all that, I think it'd be time to get rid of them. So like a tire like a Duro or, you know, even a knobby treaded tire would be a good replacement for wintertime. And then they also have like, I think it's a carbide spike tire. I was looking at those the other day and I thought, okay, well, if you want to next level it, then that would be the way to go. So changing your tires out so that you don't slip on the ice or the snow or anything like that. And I think once all of that's done, then proper de-icing and checks before and after a ride are really important. So if you've been out riding, you know, let's say to work and back and it had snow and it was wet and stuff like that, and getting your bike to a place where it can actually dry out, and then you can inspect it and make sure everything's still good on it. And then again, the next day before you ride, have a quick check through everything just to make sure you didn't miss anything. Then I think your ride would be very reliable and you'd have, you know, the least amount of issues possible with your winter commuter ride. All right, so what should the hobbyist do? This is the category I fall in, and what brought me to, you know, wanting to create this video is to start exploring like what is a way that somebody who builds kind of all the time and is riding most of their projects all the time, but then winter comes and a lot of those projects are going to go in the shed and a couple of them are going to be what you ride. I was thinking about that pretty strongly in like, I just don't really want something to sit all the time. So creating a startup and run routine for all of your builds is really important. This is something you may have to put on the calendar. That way you'll remember to do it. Now, the thing that you could do is go out, start it, let it run for a little bit and turn it off. I think you actually need to put a little more time into it than that. Start it, ride it up and down the road and get everything moving on it, and then turn it off and store it. So that way it's not just a short-term startup and then you turn it off and then you go do it again. So I would be cautious about that. So making up a starting up routine for everything, that could be one day where you go spend a couple of hours and you start one after the other and do that, right? Then that'll tell you the health of all of your bikes as you get through the winter time. So the next thing is adding a fuel stabilizer to even the ones that you're riding. This will prevent any time that a bike is sitting for, a week or 2 or 3 or whatever, and you didn't get to it. Now, if you have a startup routine, this won't be a problem. But for those of us that this may happen to, then adding a fuel stabilizer just wouldn't hurt anything. There's some of the oils that you could add as your 2-stroke oil that have a stabilizer in it. So that can help you right off the bat, and that's a year-round kind of thing. So you've already done it, right? The next thing is to, if you're going to store one for a long time, then go ahead and go full on with it. So drain the carburetor and put fuel stabilizer in the tank, or drain the tank and then start with fresh gas the next year. A lot of people have really good luck with that. The one thing about going back to the non-ethanol fuel. Anybody I know who's done that, they just run it, they store it, they start it up next year, and it always runs. So that's a really positive, solution to it all. Now, again, all the above applies for the Commuter, tires, whole bike lubrication, and the fuel stabilizer. That would just apply. So I would take, if I was anybody, I think the Commuter way to go, where you're thinking of all those things that are giving you the healthiest, conditions for your bike, you might as well do them, right? What about the bullet train? Now, it has a battery, and what do we do about that? So everything applies that we talked about in, winterization for this engine. It's just a two-stroke, just like the other ones. But battery maintenance is important. So what we would do there is get a battery, maintenance charger, plug this thing in, and then let it maintain it throughout the entire winter. So let me know below what your thoughts are and how you handle winterization of your motorized bike. I'm curious to see who's a commuter on here and then who's a hobbyist and how you've handled any of the situation, because I'm looking at getting a different shed and everything, and I want to start implementing this into my riding routine. So let me know below, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, like this video. I'm excited for this year. 2023 is going to be a beautiful year. We've got a lot in store for you. Let's roll.